Okay, so let's just dive right in. We're going to talk about something I find absolutely fascinating. How developers back in the 80s pulled off these incredible and sometimes kind of stupid tricks to build entire universes on a machine that had less power than the remote that unlocks your car. Seriously.
And the classic example, the one everyone thinks of, is Super Mario Bros. I mean, how did Nintendo manage to create a game with 32 sprawling levels?
Using only this much space? 40. Yeah, that's 40 kilobytes. Not megabytes, not gigabytes, kilo. To give you some perspective, a single screenshot from a modern game can be 1,000 times bigger than the entire Super Mario Bros. Game file. So how on earth is that even possible?
Well, it all starts with the absolutely brutal limitations of the original Nintendo Entertainment System from 1985. You have to understand, this wasn't just a challenge for developers, it was the entire reality they had to work in. Just look at how ridiculously small these numbers are. We're talking a 1.79 megahertz CPU, 2 kilobytes of system RAM, another 2 kilobytes for video. And that 40 kilobyte cartridge had to hold the entire game. There's no operating system, no hard drive, no nothing. Everything had to be engineered with an almost painful level of efficiency.
And at the heart of it all is this one simple fact. The NES was an 8-bit machine. And what that means is, as far as the console is concerned, everything, and I mean everything in the entire game world, Mario's position, the color of a block, a Goomba speed, it's all just a number between 0 and 255. That's it. That's your entire vocabulary to build a world.
So let's tackle the first big problem. It's the most obvious one, really. How do you even draw anything on the screen? The math here just doesn't add up. A single full-screen image on the NES would take up about 15 kilobytes of data. But wait, the system only has 2 kilobytes of video RAM. You literally can't even fit one single frame of the game in memory. The solution was as genius as it was simple. Stop thinking in pixels and start thinking in tiles. You see, the NES doesn't draw the screen, it assembles it. Every single visual you see is built from a library of 512 pre-drawn 8x8 pixel squares. So think of it less like painting a masterpiece and more like using a very limited set of rubber stamps. Let's see how this actually works. In Super Mario Bros., a lot of the levels share this very generic repeating background with the clouds and the hills, right? It's just the same few stamp tiles used over and over and over again. Then, the game does what's called set decoration. It just overlays the unique parts of that specific level, the blocks, the pipes, the pits to fall into, right on top of that generic background. And this is the trick. This is the big aha moment. This is all the game actually needs to store for the level layout. Not a whole 15 kilobyte picture of the screen, just a tiny little list of instructions that says, hey, put a question block here, put 4 bricks over there. And the result of this is mind-blowing. The entire first level of Super Mario Bros., World 1-1, is stored in just 101 bytes. No, that's not a typo. 101 bytes for a level that, when we were kids, felt like this massive, scrolling world. Insane. Okay, so that's graphics handled. But what about movement? I mean, Mario's jump is legendary for its feel, right? It has weight, it has acceleration. That requires physics. And, well, physics requires math. And here we hit another brick wall. The NES processor can't multiply or divide. It definitely can't do calculus. For all practical purposes, it can only add and subtract. So how in the world do you make Mario feel like he has real weight? Well, you fake it. You do it with another brilliant trick. Developers used a system called 8-8 fixed-point fractions. Basically, they used 2 numbers to track Mario's position. The first number was his actual pixel location on the screen, but the second number was a subpixel, a fraction of a pixel that we, the players, never even see. By adding these tiny, invisible fractions to his speed every single frame, they created that smooth, iconic arc for his jump without ever doing any complex math. And this same keep it simple, stupid philosophy applied everywhere. In a fast game like Contra, checking if dozens of complex bullet and enemy shapes are overlapping 60 times a second is just impossible. So they simplified. The player is always just a single point, and every enemy is just a simple rectangle. All the game has to do is ask, is this point inside this rectangle? It's a stunningly simple, stupid solution that just works. But, you know, some problems can't just be simplified away with geometry. Some games, like Tetris or Final Fantasy, they absolutely live and die by randomness. And here's maybe the biggest twist of all. The NES has no built-in way to generate a random number. At all. It can't do it. So if your game needs randomness to decide which Tetris piece comes next, well, you have to invent randomness from scratch.
And this led to some of the most creative solutions you can imagine. You had the elegant approach. Tetris used a really clever mathematical algorithm to create a pseudo-random stream of numbers that felt real. Then you had the simpler approach. Final Fantasy just has a list, a hard-coded table of 256 random numbers baked right into the cartridge, and it just reads them off one by one. But my favorite, the most beautifully stupid solution has to be Contra. It generates a random number by just taking the current frame count and adding it to a memory address over and over as fast as it can until it needs a number. And whatever number it lands on, boom, that's your random number. It's totally absurd, and it works perfectly.
So, when you look at all these clever hacks and shortcuts and workarounds, this clear philosophy starts to bubble up.
And it's really this idea. There is immense, undeniable value in embracing the stupid, in finding that solution that is simple, that is effective, and yeah, maybe it's a little bit ridiculous, but you know what? It gets the job done.
And I think this is way more than just a history lesson. These tricks teach us stuff we can still use today. First, that constraints breed creativity. The lack of power forced a whole new kind of ingenuity. Second, that done is so much better than perfect. Shipping a game with a lookup table for random numbers was way better than never shipping it at all. And finally, that sometimes the simple, stupid solution is actually the most elegant one you'll find. Note, this video is for reference only. Take this further. I'm genuinely excited to see what you discover. Drop topics you'd like covered, leave a rating, subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Until next time.